If you have never watched the movie Swamp Thing from 1982, what do you imagine the movie would be like? And before you give me your answer, I'll just let you know that it was directed by Wes Craven, who probably is most famous for doing the Scream franchise, at least the first couple of movies, I think, and being the mind behind Nightmare on Elm Street. So, kind of classic horror director from the 1980s directed this movie in the 1980s. So, what do you think? What do you think it's like? Well, I'm sorry to disappoint you, hypothetical viewer, but it's not like that at all. 1982 Swamp Thing is for the most part, really boring creature feature where nothing really happens until the end of the movie. And the end of the movie does get pretty wild, so but I don't think that it redeems itself enough. And I think that there's one main problem with the movie, and this is going to be a weird thing to criticize, but the movie is so bright and they're in a swamp, and I know the sun shines in the swamp, but you think like dark places and trees and shadows and things lurking in the shadow, and it doesn't have that. And I think it's not like remarkably bright by the standards of movie making at the time. They just filmed it during the day and the sun was out. Now, even like really optimistic films are not that bright. They don't have that level of color saturation. So that kind of doesn't really work well with the theme of the movie. What is the theme of the movie? I guess the theme of the movie is like, you shouldn't play God or whatever. But if I actually talk about the plot, it's going to be wild and it doesn't make any sense. Not even wild, it's like a plot that doesn't make any sense. So there's like this scientist who gets killed, and this other scientist, played by the female lead, she needs to replace him, named Cable. And as she comes into this research station, which is in the middle of the swamp, she gets introduced to everything that's going on. She gets introduced to this one guy, and what is that guy's name? I don't know. I don't remember. I didn't really care about this movie. Um, his name, yeah, was Alec Holland. And Alec Holland is working on this project with his sister in this swamp because they want to create plants that have like an animal aggression sort of thing, which doesn't make any sense. But anyway, his sister, this is important for the plot. His sister makes a breakthrough and creates this sort of like green goop, and she accidentally spills it on the floor. And Alec notices that where she spilt it, things are growing. And then they get interrupted because some terrorists come in and they're trying to steal this formula. And they basically shoot Alex's sister, and he runs away with this formula. He trips, he catches on fire, and then he jumps in the swamp. There's an explosion, and then he becomes the Swamp Thing. We don't see that later, but we don't see that at this moment, but we see it later. So then, and the terrorists have come to steal Alex's research, right? But that doesn't make any sense because his sister is the one who made the breakthrough. They should be trying to steal her research, but they have all of these notebooks of his, but they're missing the last notebook. And I guess the last notebook will tell them the secret to this formula, whatever. But again, his sister made the formula, so doesn't make any sense whatsoever. And the rest of the movie is basically like the Swamp Thing monster, which is partly prosthetics and partly green makeup. Doesn't look very good. Chasing around the terrorists who are trying to kidnap the main love interest. And they're all kind of like working for this guy named Arcane. And back to the creature, the swamp thing, there's a moment where he gets splashed by water and you can see the green makeup come off and you can see the color of his skin underneath. So, yeah, not the best special effects. And the reason why the movie, I think, feels that way is because this was sort of a test for Wes Craven because he had done some famous films earlier, but Hollywood wasn't really sure that he could handle a big budget movie with the stunts and the budget and everything. So he was like really focused on bringing this production to close on budget, which he did for 2.5 million. But I think he probably should have gone over and invested a little bit more money in the way the costumes look. So anyway, this brings us to the best part of the movie, which is Arcane. He is the villain of the movie, and he basically wants this formula for his own nefarious purposes. And he sees what it's done to the Swamp Thing, and the Swamp Thing can talk, and he goes on these like weird philosophical French rants that don't really make any sense. And he says something like, "Yes, he's the perfect creature. He's the perfect balance of nature and man." And then so he wants to take this formula, but before he takes the formula, he gives it to one of his henchmen, and the henchman like shrinks into this little imp creature because the henchman, even though he's a big burly guy, is like really a coward. And then the Alec Holland Swamp Thing says, "Yes, the formula just reveals who you are," and uh, the Arcane, he takes this. He takes the formula, even though he knows himself, I guess. But he's like, yeah, yeah, I'll be like this brilliant and cool monster guy. But he turns into like this hideous, devilish monster. And there's like a fight at the end. So that character is really, really interesting. But for the most part, the movie is quite boring. And there's a moment where I was falling asleep, and then I was looking and I was, not paying attention, as you kind of doze off. And then Adrienne Barbeau, the actress who plays Alice Cable, she suddenly was like naked and bathing in the swamp. And I was like, of course, it attracted my attention because, of course, right? Because you're just watching this boring, brightly colored swamp and this guy in this bad costume run around and chase people and get chased. And then you see her, and she's like straight up bathing in a swamp. I'm not sure how that's supposed to be healthy. But anyway, she's bathing in the swamp and she's naked. And from the character's perspective, it makes sense if you're bathing in a swamp that you would be naked. But clearly, Craven and the screenwriters, they put it in there just to be titillating, right? And I was trying to think about like, when have I ever seen full frontal nudity in a DC film? And I think this is probably the only one. And there's actually an interesting story behind that because they had an international theatrical edition of the film that included moments like this, because there's two moments of nudity basically. One is where she's bathing, and then there's some weird sex party that Arcane has where like these women, and they, it's like a sex party, but they're not actually having sex, but you can see a lot of stuff, let's say, if you're into that. But anyway, there was like this international theatrical edition, and when they put it out on DVD in the early 2000s, they used the wrong edition because there was like an American theatrical or home release edition that was PG. So basically, they put this into Blockbuster, and then families were like, "Oh yeah, we'll watch this movie, no nudity whatsoever," and then you see that, and they were quite surprised by that, which is wild. And the crazy part is that the movie, it wasn't really successful in the cinema, but the rentals, the home video rentals, really made it a hit, so that there was a sequel. And I think probably the reason, well, I don't know, I think maybe there are two reasons why it ended up becoming a hit. The first one, why it ended up becoming a hit. The first one is that like the cover art looks really cool. So, when you're renting a movie, you're just basically looking at the cover art, or you used to be. That's how you chose it. You looked at the cover art for a few minutes, you looked over at the description, you're like, yeah, I'll check that out. So that's probably the one thing. And the other thing is video rentals were not some like obviously there were age restrictions, but you could get around them if you were a teenage boy. So basically, probably teenage boys found out about the scenes, but they weren't even in there. Maybe there was a rumor that there was like nudity and teenage boys were renting the movie to see the nudity. I don't know. So, yeah, the only interesting things about this movie are the nudity and the performance of the actor playing Arcane. It's like great over the top kind of thing that doesn't make any sense. The plot doesn't make any sense for the most part. It's very boring. I would give it like a 4 out of 10. Like, yeah, just not good. It's not a good comic book adaptation. It's not a good movie. Yeah, not good. But what do you think? Let me know your thoughts in the comment section. I'm trying to get to 40 subscribers by the end of July. I think I can do it. We hit our goals for June. We're at 20 subscribers, so 40 for by the end of July. If you like what I do, subscribe to the channel, like the video, leave a comment. All of those things help other people find this weird little review channel. No AI is used in making this. I don't even write the scripts because I'm on this weird thing where I'm trying to be the most prolific reviewer of all time. So obviously I don't have time to be polished. So this is 100% human. So if you support that kind of thing, you know, do what you do, subscribe and all that stuff. All right. Thanks. Bye-bye.